The wait is almost over. Wanderer has been officially announced in the 3.3 livestream last Friday, where miHoYo has shown a lot of his and Farazan's info that many of us already knew about, thanks to leaks. I already made a few other videos about Wanderer's numerical performance, and while all of it is obviously subjected to change, and also subjected to typical pre-release misconceptions, I'm rather optimistic about my views on Wanderer. Today, I'll talk about his weapons, showing you their damage performance on multiple types of teams, and then summarizing those results through different tier lists, to provide a graphical idea of what I'm talking about. Weapons analysis on different teams is needed because Wanderer is quite varied in terms of units he can be paired with, and when he's paired with specific support such as Yunjin and Bennett, some weapons get favored over others, because of how the buffs Wanderer receives change the balance of his stats. Let's start from his most typically talked about team in pre-release, Hypercarry Wanderer, the one featuring Yunjin, Bennett and Farazan as his supports. Yunjin is very impactful in terms of how she changes Wanderer's weapons outlook, since she provides him with fixed flat damage buffs that don't scale with attack at all. Add Bennett's buffs to that mix, which make Wanderer's attack very high, and it's easy to see attack-based weapons such as Skyward Atlas are penalized on this team. His signature is significantly ahead of other options. While 10 to 20% might not seem a massive difference, on a team like Hypercarry Wanderer, where the latter generates 90% of the team's damage, that can result in something like 200,000 damage over other options, which can be really felt in real-game scenarios. There is a difference in terms of combos between his signature and other options, thanks to its attack speed buff. Lost Prayer finally finds a home thanks to how long Wanderer's field time is. In fact, he gets to stay 13 seconds on field per rotation at most on this team, which means he'll be able to build up 2 stacks for regular combos, and get a third just in time for his elemental burst. The other weapons in the same tier are just hanging there compared to Lost Prayer. Solar Pearl's normal attack-related buffs will only last 6 seconds per rotation considering it can only be activated by elemental skill hits, which Wanderer never generates except on elemental skill activation. Kagura is just a great stat stick, as its effect basically has no impact on Wanderer's rotation damage. Crit rate weapons perform better on Wanderer because of C6 Farazan, which is part of the reason Lost Prayer looks so good. Ranked lower, we see Solar Pearl Refinement 1, and then some attack scaling weapons such as Memory of Dust and Skyward Atlas, that do relatively poorly here because of reasons I explained earlier. Widsith Refinement 5 is also here, despite seeming better than other options listed above on paper. The reason is that its RNG-related effects are an inconvenience you can't really control, considering 1 time out of 3 you'll end up with a useless Elemental Mastery buff, and that the length of the buff doesn't even cover Wanderer's whole damage window, meaning his elemental burst won't be affected by Widsith's passive in most rotations. Ranked even lower, we find weapons that are really easily obtainable, as they're either free to play or really common in general, but their attainability is matched by how bad they are. If the best weapon you can give Wanderer is one of the weapons in Tier C, I'm praying for you. Now, let's see how the situation changes if we take Yunjin out of the team. Since the removal of Yunjin possibly allows for the addition of a shielder, I've included the shielded version of Memory of Dust in this comparison, which allows it to get double the attack buffs from its stacks. This no Yunjin scenario makes Wanderer's weapon choices slightly less exclusive, with Tier B now being a mix of solid options rather than a bunch of weapons that might feel scuffed. It's important to remember that the less you buff Wanderer, the less his damage will be important for the team, so if you replace Yunjin with a sub-DPS for example, the difference between Wanderer's signature weapon and other options will matter much less than it does on the Hypercarry team. As expected, attack-based weapons benefit from this scenario, as they now stack up very well to other alternative options. Lost Prayer is still the outlier here, as its combination of perfect stats and versatile passive makes it a great overall option. There is not much else to say here, because Wanderer's team rotations don't really change a lot even if you swap out all units other than him, since most of his teams are generally based around the idea he'll spend 13 seconds or more on field per rotation, so weapons that are penalized because of proc-based restriction, such as Solar Pearl, don't really improve excluding very specific scenarios. The third and last scenario is the one that excludes both Bennett and Yunjin. This is an unlikely one, because Bennett is an incredible teammate for Wanderer, so the teams where he's not going to be used can be counted on one hand. Still, there are relevant examples, such as Double Hydro with Yelan and Xingqiu. The total lack of attack buffs works wonders for Skyward Atlas and Memory of Dust, who now become extremely competitive weapons, especially the latter when there is a shielder on the team. Conversely, 4-star weapons are generally penalized by the lack of attack buffs, since their lower overall base attack stats can be felt here. However, in scenarios where there is only Pharazôn buffing Wanderer, the former Harbinger might not even end up accounting for half of the team damage, so if you plan to pull him to play him on this type of time, you likely shouldn't bother pulling his signature weapon. Based on the calcs and rankings I've shown, it's easy to see how Lost Prayer is a very consistent option. If you have it, especially at higher refinements, ignoring Wanderer's signature weapon is largely fine. I would call Solar Pearl a nice cheap option, if not for the fact it's not that competitive until you get it at Refinement 5. Another observation that can be made is how Hypercarry Wanderer might not necessarily be your best option if you don't have Wanderer's signature weapon, but luckily Wanderer has many other options for his teams, which I'll address in the future. I'm done for today. Let me know what you thought about the video in the comments, and if you liked it, put a thumbs up and subscribe. See you in the next video.